right. We'll go ahead and get started. There might be a few more come in. Back to normal. Looks like everybody's here. Stan Penn, you're still out of town. You all will notice pretty quick that I am getting over I'm getting over a little cold, and I'm still a little stopped up. Got me a piece of candy up here just in case, so in case I get a little dry mouth. So anyway, but I don't feel too bad. But appreciate everybody being here this morning. We're going to start a new book, Philippians, something everybody's very familiar with. Read many times, heard some lessons over. Today's lessons, there's a lot to it. I don't know that I'll get through it all. If I don't, I'll pick up next week. But we are, of course, Paul is going to write the letter to the Philippians. In order to write the letter, what has to happen first? He has to be there first. Do you write letters to people you don't know? Well, maybe. Maybe you get mad and write letters to somebody you don't know. But for the most part, you write letters, and nobody writes letters much anymore, but, emails or whatever we got today. You don't write to people you don't know. Well, Paul's the same way. He had to be there and plant the church before he writes the letter. So we're going to start here, at least the first two chapters of this book. We're going to start with his first visits to Philippi and what led him to write the letter, which I think is pretty good. So obviously, what book are we starting in? Acts. Okay, we're starting in Acts when Paul is introduced to the Philippians, and that's where he is there. I want you to look with me real quick at the page before lesson 1, where it just says Philippians, and it kind of describes the book a little bit. I don't always refer to this. I usually read it. I don't always refer to this. I thought there were some really good things in this, and I'm just going to pick out a few things. You can follow along if you want to. It's not the worst thing in the world to read that. Most of you probably don't always read that, but a little introduction. And I'm just going to read some excerpts from here. It says, despite his change, Paul overflowed with gratitude, confidence, and encouragement for the Philippians. The gospel brings joy, not from circumstances, but from Christ. And that's going to be one of our themes up here in Philippians, is that joy, as you can see, what the author says here, joy does not come from our circumstances, but from Christ. I think some people think if you're not happy in life, or you don't have a situation where you're not in a happy state, that then you can't be happy. If circumstances here on earth don't make you happy, then what? Not happy. All right? Is that the attitude a Christian should have? What should bring us joy? Yeah, our salvation. That's right. So that's a hard concept. I'm not saying it's easy, but that's a hard concept. Things aren't going well here, so why should I be happy? Why should I be happy if things aren't going well for me? Well, if you're a Christian, that's where your joy should come from. Okay? If you want to bring what's one of the main things that we're asked to do, not the only thing, and maybe not the most important thing, but what's one of the things that we're asked to do? We're asked to bring others to Jesus, right? That's one of our callings. I think we can all agree on that. Bring others to Jesus. Well, do you think your attitude and your actions play a part in that? If people see you unhappy and moping and complaining all the time, is that going to make them want to have the same beliefs as you? Is that going to make them want to, be a part of the church? If they see Christians most of the time or all the time acting down and dejected and upset, no. Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But we need to also remember the things that we should rejoice.
Yeah.
And we struggle with that.
Yeah. And it's our overall. Sure, that's a great point. We're going to be sad. We're going to be mad. We're going to be upset. That's right. But it does not need to be our overall. It does not be our overall countenance. It needs to be a time period right there. Paul. Two things happened to Paul when he is in Philippi here at first. He's beaten, he's put in chains, and he's put in jail, okay? And what does he do? What's his reaction? He sings praises and he prays, right, David? And who hears him? You remember? The other prisoners. The other prisoners hear him, okay? And when the gates are open, when the earthquake, and we're going to talk about this, when the earthquake comes and the gates are open, what happens? They all stay, okay? You think that's an accident? You think that happened just out of the blue? No. It's Paul's attitude. It's Paul's, and Silas as well, who's with him. It's his attitude and his actions that bring people to Christ, okay? And that's what this little forward. So I'm getting pretty far into the lesson here. It says a couple more things. Even in suffering, Christians are never without hope. This is at the bottom. In a world filled with fear, division, and despair. And goodness knows we are in a world right now filled with fear, division, and despair. Philippians invites us to a new way of life centered not on success or comfort, but on Christ alone. Okay? Our life is not about being successful all the time. It's not about being comfortable all the time. Okay? Those are things, sure, we like that. Those are great things. But when we're not successful in something, and when we're not comfortable in life, like Paul found himself, we can still find, being centered on Christ. And that's kind of what this is talking about here. One good comment. Any other comments? Any other thoughts on that?
One thing when the thunder hit and they shook themselves, it says that all the prisoners.
Do what? Yeah.
All the prisoners.
Yeah. Not just Paul, yeah.
All of them.
All of them stayed. That's right. So there was an effect. He had an effect. Paul's actions had an effect on these people, probably men, all men. So I was going to say on these men, but that's right. All right, let's look at the introduction here. We're going to read as we go. Each section we're going to read separately. I think that's going to help us focus on a little bit. So Paul and Barnabas always wanted to repeat or revisit the places that they went. They always wanted to go back, and that's a good thing. They went to Philippi, and they wanted to go back to them. They wrote the letter. They always say, he always said, "I long to see you." So that's something that they did. And of course, we also know that Paul and Barnabas split over who? Anybody remember? John Mark. That's right. They split over John Mark. And I think just want to say a little something about this. What happened with the split over John Mark? Barnabas went with John Mark, and Paul went with Silas, right? Okay? Now, here is an argument, here is a debate, here is a conflict between two men. Paul and Barnabas, successful missionaries who have different ideas on what needs to happen. One of them thinks John Mark needs to go. One of them does not think John Mark needs to go. So what happens? They split. I don't think it's an angry split. I think it's a fairly amicable split, but they still split. But what's the result of it? Yeah. The result of it is what? Good things happen, okay? Good things happen. So it's okay. That's okay what happened between Paul and Barnabas. It ended up being a good thing. One of them, I guess you could say one of them had to be right and one of them had to be wrong. Was Paul wrong about John Mark? Very possibly so. Paul was human. He was wrong a lot. We think of Paul as a great man, and he was, but you think Paul didn't make mistakes? You think Paul didn't make bad decisions? I don't know any human that hasn't, So
Does it necessarily have to be someone was right, someone was wrong, or maybe just a
different opinion. That's a good point, Jody. A difference of opinion. And personality, that's right. Yeah.
They had a conflict with that, one could get along with it better than the other.
Yep. And the result was something good. That's the key. The result was something good. So we can have differences of opinions, and good things can come out of it sometimes. Not always. I know bad things can come out too. So, but I thought that was interesting. Why did they decide to go to Philippi? What's the first reason they decided to go to Philippi? We sing songs about it. What did Paul hear? The Macedonian call. Okay, he saw a vision of a man in Macedonia who was begging him to come to, and that's where Philippi is, okay? I don't remember isn't there a song about that? Todd's busy, Todd's working back there. Isn't there a song about the Macedonian call, Todd?
Yeah.
That's what I thought, yeah, I thought there was. So that's what, do what? Yeah. So that's what Paul heard. Paul had a vision, and that's why they came. That's why they went there. All right. Where is Macedonia? Where is Philippi here? It is a fairly major trade route, but what I've heard and what I've read, it's not quite as major as like Ephesus or some of the other places that Paul went. But I guess one of the keys to our story here, let's see if you can read my mind here. Where is Philippi as far as who is it controlled by? Rome. Okay, Rome. That's a key here. Philippi is a Roman colony, okay? And that's going to be key to our story. So when Paul goes there, what does he find? Now that's a trick question. I'll condense it down for you a little bit. Where does Paul usually go? First place he goes in a city? Synagogue. That's right, David. Why wasn't there one there? Wasn't many Jews. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Wasn't many Jews. Okay? So there wasn't many Jews, so there was no synagogue to go to. So Paul had to do things a little different. You know, he had to do things a little different. Apparently there were some people outside the city there. And they were, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know if they were worshiping. I might say they were worshiping or something. And that's where he's going to start. Okay, that's where he's going to start. So let's read 11 through 15, this is the shortest section we're going to read, and this is mainly about Lydia. This is where he meets kind of his, I guess you could call his first convert in Philippi. Therefore, sailing for Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothrace. The next day we came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the foremost city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. And we were staying in that city for some days. And on the Sabbath day, we went out of the city to the riverside, where prayer was customarily made. And we sat down and spoke to the women who were there, who we met there. Now a certain woman named Lydia heard us. She was a seller of purple from the city of Thyatira, who worshiped God. The Lord opened her heart to heed the things spoken by Paul. And when she and her household were baptized, she begged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come into my house and stay." So she persuaded us. All right. Basically that little section is pretty self-explanatory. There was a place where people went and prayed. They weren't Jews. So I guess it's a little confusing about where, why were they believers? Were they, exactly what were they exactly? I think they were probably believers. But Paul goes out to where this happens, and he meets Lydia, okay, a seller of purple, and we often associate that with Lydia, and I won't say he converted her because she was already praying, but he baptized her, okay? He baptized her and ended up baptizing her whole family and went to stay with them, okay? He went to stay with them. So this is basically right here, this woman and her household is what? The beginning of the church of Philippi, okay? This is the beginning of the church of Philippi and what Paul has done here, okay? And the author kind of makes a point. What does it take to get started? One. It takes one, okay? It takes one to get started. And then one goes to two, and two goes to three, and household and things like that. So Lydia is kind of where it started in Philippi. It takes one, and that's what happened in Philippi. Lydia is baptized, and her whole family, and she wants Paul and his companions to come stay with her. All right, so that's a pretty good start, and that's really it's an important event, but it's really the kind of the smallest part of what we're going to study here today. Would somebody read 16 through 24 for me? Okay.
who brought her masters much profit by fortune telling. This girl followed Paul and us, and cried out, saying, These men are the servants of the Most High God, who proclaim to us the way of salvation. And this she did for many days. But Paul, greatly annoyed, turned and said to the Spirit, I command you in the name of Jesus Christ to come out of her. And he came out that very hour. But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace to the authorities. And they brought them to the magistrates and said, These men, being Jews, exceedingly trouble our city, and they teach customs which are not lawful for us, being Romans, to receive or observe. Then the multitude rose up together against them, and the magistrates tore off their clothes and commanded them to be beaten with rods. And when they had laid many stripes on them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to keep them securely. Having received such a charge, he put them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks.
Okay, so Paul goes into the city, and as he always does, he is continuing to preach and things like that. Two things in this lesson. Two things happened that when I first read it, I had a question about, and I didn't really understand. And I hope I have found an answer to that, and I don't know if you questioned it as well. So the first thing is they're preaching, and it doesn't take long till this slave girl with the spirit of divination, as Jody said, starts following them around and starts saying what? These men are preaching the true gospel that lead to salvation. All right. What's your first thought right there?
It's a good thing.
Free advertising, right? Everybody wants free advertising.
Besides a demon, something that he,
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the problem.
Words coming out of her mouth.
That's right. That's going to be the problem. She's telling the truth, right? She's telling the truth. But what's the problem here? My first thought is, number one, it sounds like free advertising. It sounds like something Paul would like because people know she has this spirit. People know she tells the truth. But like everything else, even the truth after so long, over and over again, it's like, what? Whew, that's enough, That's enough. But what's the real problem?
Well, they profit, men profit off
Yeah.
this girl and her. We don't really know what it was, so she might have been able to prophesy or do something.
She apparently did,
But
yep.
Have this some kind of talent, and when that went out, that talent was gone, and they lost their income.
From what I understand, what kind of spirit was this? I know what it says, divination, and I looked that up. What is that? That's not a,
Divination?
yeah. It's future. It's telling the future, basically. It's telling the future. But where did this spirit come from? It wasn't God, okay? I'm not going to call it an evil spirit because they don't call it an evil spirit. But I do know what? It did not come from God, okay? This spirit did not come from God. So your first thought, and my first thought might be, this person seems to be helping Paul in saying that, hey, listen to this man. Why would a evil spirit say that? Even if it's obviously true, but why would an evil spirit say that? A lot of things don't make sense about this. But from what I read and from what I understand, I want your thoughts on this if you've got any of your comments. What I understand, Paul cast this spirit out because, number one, it says he got tired of it, basically. He got annoyed by it. And it wasn't what? It wasn't from God, okay? From what I read, people believe that this was sending a mixed message. This woman was proclaiming these things when in the past, I don't know what she had done, but the spirit that was causing her to proclaim these things was not the Holy Spirit. And it was not the spirit that Paul had, okay? So it was kind of, Paul seen it as sending a mixed message. So he sends, which he has the power to do, he sends the spirit out. Anybody, please, thoughts on that? You have any thoughts on that?
I noticed it doesn't tell where the spirit went.
No.
Like, one with pigs and maybe some more.
Yeah. No, just send it out, right? Just send it out. So that's right. Don't know where the spirit went. Don't know what happened, but we do know that it was out of the woman, and we do know like it was that's going to be our second problem. Is after it's out of the woman. That's going to be our second problem. Let's see, page 6. It says, I don't understand this. I'm going to read this. This is on page 6, first full paragraph towards the end. It says, the text reports her persistent proclamations greatly annoyed Paul. This, however, should not be understood to mean Paul found her irritating or a nuisance. Instead, he was disturbed, and then it says, see Acts 2 for the only other thing, and it talks about disturbed right there. You know, to me, greatly annoyed, disturbed, nuisance, irritating, all those about mean the same thing to me, you know. Absolutely, absolutely. Yep, yep. So the only reason I talk about that a little bit is you would, you know, on the surface you might think that this would be a good thing for Paul. Maybe it was at first. Maybe the first couple times it was a good thing, but it definitely became a nuisance. It disturbed Paul because why? Because it was not the Holy Spirit making this proclamation.
I think also, you know, you could infer, because we don't know, but when it said that she cried out, I mean, could you imagine trying to preach
Yeah.
and have somebody screaming at the
Yeah.
top of their lungs?
Right.
Hey, it's Matt, and
Yeah, constantly. That's right. That's right.
Everywhere you went.
Yes.
So yeah, that would be a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. We all love our kids, but what happens when they're little? Hopefully not when they're grown, but when they're little, what happens? Mama, Daddy did it, you know, what do you do eventually? Stop it. Be quiet. You know, that kind of seems like what I picture Paul doing here is like with a little kid. That's enough. You know, that's enough. I've had enough. So anyway, but pretty interesting. But obviously this leads to this is a huge part of the story. If all he had done was cast out the demon, that would be the end of the story, and that would be an interesting little plot here. But what happens? These men, as you can imagine, these men who make money or who made money off of this girl, now she does not have the spirit anymore, and they go to the authorities about Paul. Okay, they go to the authorities, and they blame, of course, them for this trouble. They call them Jews. What do they say? These Jews. Okay, these Jews, which we know, David told us earlier, there's not a big Jewish population in Philippi. It's mostly Roman citizens. These Jews are causing us problems. Okay, us Romans. That's right. These Jews are causing, and that's a big part of the story, obviously, Jody. Us Romans. Well, what do they not know? Paul's Roman. You know. Yeah. So that's my next big question. We'll get that get there in a second. If you've read this, then you know what happens next, but you also know what happens at the end. And I did not understand this at all, and I'm still not 100% sure I understand it. They bring Paul and his companion to the magistrates. They strip their clothes off, they beat them, and they throw them in jail. All right? What does Paul, you know, I don't know the best way to say this. What does Paul tell them the next day after they're let out?
He said we're not leaving until they come back.
Yeah, but he also tells them we're Romans for the first time.
Right.
That's my question to everybody. Why didn't he tell them he was Romans before he was beaten? From my understanding, telling these men he was a Roman citizen would have prevented the beating, right? I don't see any other way around it, because when they find out he's a Roman, they freak out. I mean, oh, we're in trouble. We've beat a Roman citizen. Yes, exactly. So, all that doesn't answer my question. Why didn't he tell them first? Why didn't he tell them he's a Roman citizen? If you were in that spot and you were getting ready to get treated like Paul and you could stop it, I think I'd stop it. You know, I think I'd stop it. All right? Well,
I don't know, maybe his suffering was sending a message to others. He was willing to suffer for what he believed in.
well, I think what happened, that not just the suffering, yes, that's a big part of it, not just the suffering, but what happened in the jail.
Oh, he saved the.
Yeah. It seems to me, without it coming out and directly saying, it seems to me Paul may have had some inclination of what was the future events, what was going to happen in that prison, okay? Because what happened in that prison led a lot of people to Christ, okay? That's the only thing I can come up with of why Paul did not say he was a Roman citizen until the next day when he was let out of prison, is that Paul knew or had some inclination that what was going to happen next needed to happen. Any other thoughts, though? I am more than open to any other theories. Anybody? Well, we all know kind of what happens next, and that is a big part of the story. What happens next is, excuse me, he's put in prison, and not just put in prison. The magistrates tell this man, they tell the jailer, Paul's kind of a special situation, isn't he? He is put in the inner jail with locks on his, at least his feet for sure, chains, I think, on his feet and his legs both. And what is Paul's reaction? Sings and prays. All right, he sings and prays. And folks, I'll be honest, this is the crux of the story right here, okay? Paul singing and praying in prison is kind of the crux of the story here. And I don't want to oversimplify it and say that any time you are in a bad situation, you should sing and pray, because I understand how hard that is. And I understand that's not human nature, and I understand we're humans. And maybe you say Paul's a little different, and I grant you that. Paul's a little different, but he was a man. But folks, I don't know how to say it other than say it as in what Paul did here. What was the result of it? What's the end result? Souls were saved, people were baptized, people were brought to Christ, okay, because of Paul's actions here. Now, like I said, it's not easy, but when we are in a bad situation in life, was Paul treated fairly here? No, Paul was not treated fairly. He did not deserve to be beaten or thrown into prison. But what was his reaction? What were possible other reactions of Paul besides the one he made? That's not a trick question. Just what else could he have done? What would you have done? I want to talk to my lawyer. Beating, stomping, screaming, these people cussing maybe. These people have mistreated me. This is the worst thing in the world that's ever happened to me. If that had happened, if Paul had done that, what would have happened after that earthquake came and the jail doors were flung open? What would have happened? Who would have left? Everybody would have left. Maybe Paul too. Everybody would have left. We know from the rest of the story, if everybody left, what would the jailer have done to himself? Killed himself. He was ready to. He was going to do it anyway. That's right. He was going to do it anyway. So look at Paul's, and without me, with trying not to belabor the point too much, look at the reaction Paul had to being mistreated, and look what it led to. Look at the reaction Paul had when he was mistreated, and look what it led to. Lives were saved. People came to Christ. People were baptized. Okay? Thoughts on that? We're a little quiet this morning. Not too bad. But anybody have any other thoughts on that? I mean, that's just a lesson right there for us, and it's hard. Like I said, I don't want to say it's easy. But once again, as Christians, we don't need to focus on what's happening right here, right now, all the time. It is necessary sometimes to focus on what's happening in your life and react to that. But we do not need to focus on that all the time. You all know people on both sides of the ledger here. You all know people who are going through very hard things, but what do? You don't see it. They are pretty happy. They want to help other people. You also know the people that are going through very hard things that what? Let everyone know and complain all the time, So I think we know what we're supposed to do as Christians. I'm not saying we do it every time because it's hard, But anyway, I'm asking, what Paul's example here and what we're asked to do is not easy. But the key there, the focus is, what are we keeping our eye on? The eternity. We're keeping our eye on what's coming, not what's here now. Okay?
Well, even tragedies in our time, things that happen in other subjects, say 9/11, how much did it open up about God and praise
It did.
I don't know how many stayed with that
Yeah.
and became a Christian and did things. So I think Paul kind of the same way in his suffering and what he did brought others to.
Brought others.
It does in our world too.
That's right. That's right. It can. It absolutely can. So, Paul didn't complain. Paul sang and prayed, and the effect it had on the other prisoners. Well, let's go ahead and tell the story. Earthquake, right? Earthquake comes. What's the doubter? What's the non-believer going to say? Earthquake's going to happen anyway. Earthquakes happen. You know, earthquakes happen. They part of nature, right? Earthquakes happen, right? Well, the author brings an interesting point that I never thought of. What's the first thing that usually happens in an earthquake? Doors don't open and chains don't fall off. What happens? Things fall. Things fall. Buildings fall. Okay? Doors don't open and shackles don't come off. Okay? So this earthquake was obviously a miracle. This earthquake was a miracle. And once again, the jail didn't fall on Paul and the prisoners and kill them all. The door opened. Two things happened. The door opened and the shackles fell off. Okay? So the guard, knowing that he was charged with keeping Paul, obviously got upset. He probably knew what. That's right, Jody. If Paul escaped, if he didn't kill himself, what? They would probably kill him. That's right. They would probably kill him. So he's going to kill himself, and Paul says, "What? Wait. We're all here. We're all here." And what does he do right away? What does the jailer do? That's right. That's exactly right, Rick. What can I do to be saved? Okay. Obviously, these men, Paul and his companions, and now I guess maybe even the other prisoners, they have something this jailer wants. They have something this jailer wants. Let's read. It's a little bit shorter one. 25 through 34. We don't have to read it all. And he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" So they said, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and you will be saved, you and your household." Then they spoke the word of the Lord to him and all who were in his house. And he took them the same hour of the night and washed their stripes, and immediately he and his family were baptized. Now, when he had brought them into his house, he set food before them, and he rejoiced, having believed in God with all his household. So the jailer said, as we've heard this before, the jailer's not the first one to say this. This is the response to Peter's first gospel sermon. What must I do to be saved? Okay, what must I do to be saved? And we think about the progression of salvation. We hear this. We learn this as a child. Go with me here. Hear, believe, repent, be baptized. Okay, we hear these. We hear the confess, repent, confess, be baptized. We hear this all along, and I think sometimes we can be guilty of trying to move past the believe stage. Sometimes that we want to go ahead and we want to move past we want to get to the repentance and the confession and the baptism before we fully get to the believe. And remember what an important step the believe is. All right, these men saw what Paul did. They had seen these things, and Paul told them that they needed to believe. And belief is such an important part. You know, I think that might be where people might move too fast sometimes. Is they're baptized before their belief is fully blossomed, I guess, and then as things get bad or things change, that belief wavers a little bit.
Well, you have to be old enough to understand what you're hearing.
Sure.
That's where the belief comes in.
Yep.
So why they think Christine or doing little children can hear words, but they don't understand it.
Right.
You know, so that belief is very.
Belief's very important. I agree. Belief is very important. If you do something because somebody tells you to and you don't believe it, what? I don't know how much that means to you. You know, I'm not sure how much that means to you. But anyway, yes, the belief is very important. Let's see. I had something else to read. Might have already gone over it. This is kind of this is kind of the author surmising how the jailer might have known about Paul and what they were doing. This is on the middle paragraph there, about halfway through. Had the news of their preaching reached his ears earlier? Had the ones bringing Paul and Silas to the prison told him that they were bondservants of the Most High God who were proclaiming the way of salvation? Had Paul and Silas said something to him as he put their feet in the stocks? Or did he simply know instinctively that these men could help him? Who knows? All those things are possibilities, but somehow this jailer knew that these men were different, and they had something that I believe he wanted. All right, let's finish up here. After he is released from prison, I don't understand this really. The following day, the city officials gave the order to release Paul and Silas. I wonder why they only wanted them in jail one night. You know, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Is that they told the prison guard guy, they told him what? Put these guys in, we would call it solitary confinement or something like, you know, the make sure these people don't escape. And the next day, what? He tells them, let them go. Okay? He says, you know, the word comes down to the master, so let them go. Is it because of the earthquake? Maybe did they hear what happened in the prison? I don't know. But I do think it's interesting what Paul says. I do think it's really interesting what Paul says. He says, no, what? Let them come and tell me. Let them come and tell me that they're letting me go.
This is important.
It is.
And if he had just left,
Yeah.
snuck out,
Right.
silently, why was he put in
Yeah.
jail?
Yeah.
Because he was accused before all of the people in that area
Yep.
that and they believed he was a criminal.
Yep.
So if he had left and the magistrates were not held accountable for their action, on top of being the fact that he was a Roman citizen, the church could have suffered.
Yep. That's exactly right, Jody. That's why Paul sneaking out of town after he's put in jail, the people he had converted, what? Maybe.
Their followers are criminals.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe. Gosh, I was fooled by this guy, you know. And not only, we'll go a step further, Jody, when they tell him, you know, when he tells them he's a Roman citizen, they kind of get freaked out and they think they might be in trouble. And they tell him, go and what? Go now. You know, leave now. And does he? No. Where does he go? Anybody remember? Lydia's house. He goes back to Lydia's house, okay? So he does not just leave town like they said. He goes back to Lydia's house and makes sure what? Make sure they are okay, you know. So what, like Jody said, what Paul does after he is released is very important. Not just the fact that he was released, not just the fact that he convinced him he was a Roman citizen. He planted the seeds for the church, you know, going forward. He's gonna come back and visit them. He's gonna write them letters. So he does not just leave town to leave the possibility in people's minds. You know, maybe he wasn't all that he said he was. You know, but the prison guard and his family, Lydia and her family, obviously they are the ones who are going to grow the church. They're going to tell the story of Paul. They're going to tell the story of what happened. So he does leave town, but he has planted the seed for what's going to happen eventually a little bit later. Okay? Anybody else? So they let him go, and he does. You know, he doesn't go right away, but that's where we end. That's where we end the story right now. Is Paul's leaving town after baptizing, converting, and baptizing several people here in Philippi that he is going to be very concerned about, and he's going to go back and visit. Couple of the applications they're actually pretty good. Our actions in times of crisis do not go unnoticed. I want you to think about it for a second. This is obviously Paul was in times of crisis. Our actions in times of crisis do not go unnoticed. Folks, we are in a time of crisis right now in our country, in the world. You all saw what happened over the weekend and things like that. Our actions do not go unnoticed. When we stand up for people who are marginalized, when we stand up for people who are mistreated, that does not go unnoticed, okay? It does not go unnoticed when Christians stand up for people who are mistreated. And that goes for a lot of things. That goes for a lot of crisis. You know, there's a lot of crisis in life. There's a lot of crisis in things. But how you act in those situations is how people judge you by. It's easy to judge somebody good when their life is going really well, right? Okay? When their life is going really well and you look at them and you say, man, I'm going to make up a name here because I don't want to say, oh, Tom, no, Tom's here. Tom is going to church and he's doing all this work and he's doing all the things. Well, maybe there's, and you look at him, man, he's got a good job, he's got a nice house, everything's going fine, so what's preventing Tom from doing this? But when you see somebody who is facing some very difficult situations, some very hard times in life, and their faith is not shaken, and their faith is as strong as it ever was, and they are working diligently for the Lord, that sends a real message. That sends a real message. When your faith and your actions are like they always were in a time of crisis, then that sends a message. That's what happened to Paul. Okay. Now once again, I want to preface that by saying it's not easy, and I don't always do it, and everybody has issues with that. But I think that's a biblical concept. The other one is about belief. The second part is about belief. Got a couple of questions, but we're about a minute or so over. Very, very deep, very moving part right here of the book of Acts and how we're going to go on to the Philippians. Any thoughts? Anything we need to finish with? Burning questions. Judy, Kenny's not in here. I hope he's doing okay. Kenny always has questions for me after my life. I miss Kenny because Kenny's always got something